Today's guest on Adversity to Strength is Holly Eve, founder of the luxury natural deodorant brand Madame Lemy and a passionate advocate for clean beauty and inner transformation. Before launching her company, Holly was a successful celebrity makeup artist working with some of the biggest names in entertainment. But behind the scenes, she was facing deep personal struggles with addiction, self-worth, and their pressure to look perfect in an industry built on appearances. Her journey is one of raw honesty, recovery, and resilience. After getting sober, Holly made it to her mission to create beauty products that not only feel good, but do good for the body and the soul. In today's conversation, we dive into her path from the entertainment world to entrepreneurship, the healing power of purpose, and how turning pain into passion helped her build a business and a lifestyle that she loves. Holly, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the great introduction.
Hope it was all right. Take us back to the beginning. Where did your journey start for yourself?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Whenever I speak on podcasts or at universities, I always start literally from the beginning of my first memories because unfortunately, statistically, 1 in 4 women will have been abused, sexually abused. I just recently heard a statistic 1 in 3, I think by the age of 18. So I was sexually abused when I was 3 years old. They are my first memories. It was a babysitter's boyfriend, and not to start out super heavy, but later in life, I was able to connect with another victim that I found many, many years later and found out that his girlfriend was part of it, helping him get children. So you think about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. It's really wild to think that. And I'm sober now, which we can get into, but I had been sober for many years when I found out that information, and I didn't want to drink over it, but it reshaped everything I knew about my past, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Well, yeah, without doubt. As a therapist, it's one of the main area I work in. That's
Trauma.
child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Just for the simple fact, the amount of clients that's come to me, I'm like, "What are you here for?" And it just tends to be that. So that's one of the reasons there as well, and my own experiences as well. So when did you realize you'd actually been through that?
So it's interesting because there is a celebrity who came out recently and she was talking about how she was abused when she was 4. And I was reading the comments and a lot of people were saying that you're lying. How could you remember that? And the thing with trauma, as you know, and I'm sorry for what you've gone through, and it's amazing that you're working with people because it's very needed. I feel for the people that don't get help because I can only imagine all the work that I've done and how it still affects me. And so when I read those comments, I was thinking what trauma does, or at least what trauma did to my brain, is I thought about that all day long. So it's very vivid, the times that it happened, and it happened multiple times. And the interesting thing, maybe I normally wouldn't go this much in depth, but because this is the work you do, and these are the listeners, I don't remember that perpetrator, we'll call him a perpetrator, ever telling me not to say anything. It's really interesting how manipulative and how smart perpetrators are. And, I know this today. I didn't know this for a long time, but my parents were victims too. They targeted my parents. And
Trusting parents.
yeah, trusting parents. And, they know these type of people know what to say. And it's really crazy when you think about it, just how the psychology of people, what would make people want to do that. And so I kept that in. And I remember as a kid, I had a lot of learning disabilities. I couldn't pay attention in class because I was thinking about that all day long. And I always talk about my family. I have a very, very loving family, and I'm very fortunate for that. But also, there was a lot of dysfunction. So we put the fun in dysfunction. My parents, there's not been a day that they haven't said, "I love you." It's a lot of love. There was a lot of love. And there was also this paradox of a lot of neglect. My mom was an alcoholic. And my dad was in the Vietnam War. He was in the military. They both had their own historical, generational trauma. And those things.
PTSD with your dad?
PTSD. Oh, yeah. 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 He has, severe PTSD and from other things as well. And he's gotten a lot of help around that. And, it's amazing as I've gotten help to also see the healing that my parents have done, which is really amazing. But to go back, when I was 8, I think I was actually 7, this is a really heavy story, but one of the other victims, her grandparents were murdered, and they were the neighbors of the perpetrators that abused me. And really heavy, very, very heavy. And that was all over the news. And to this day, it's still a case that's talked about because it was her brother and two friends. And is this too heavy for your podcast?
No, no.
So, yes, as I was talking about the murders that happened next door to the perpetrators, I knew that that person abusing me had also been abusing the granddaughter. The granddaughter was actually the one that had found them the next day. And it was her brother and two friends. And it wasn't actually the brother who committed the murder. They were drinking, they were young, and it became this really big case, even today, that's still talked about because they were the first minors in New Mexico that were tried as adults, and all three of them sentenced. And the girl's father was a cop. I mean, it's just, this could be a documentary.
Yeah.
And because that was on the news everywhere, and my parents, I thank them for this now, but they didn't shield my brother and I from the truth. The news was on. My parents had told me what had happened. And I don't know if it was more of they couldn't help not to tell me things, but I saw a more adult view of the world, I guess, through them. And also, in a weird way, a lot of my innocence in my childhood was taken away and robbed from that person. And so I already saw, I think, the world differently. And because I was so inundated with what had happened and knowing that that had happened to that girl and other victim, and keeping that in as a secret and thinking I could have said something and having guilt around that, even though I was a child, that added a layer of already thinking about what had happened to me so much that I came out and told my mom what had happened to me when I was, I think it was about a year after that. So it still fucked with my head for a
Yeah.
while after that. But it's a really unfortunate, horrible thing that happened. And it was the thing that prompted me to tell my mother what had happened. And, my mom believed me, a lot of crying and a lot of chaos. And my dad put me in therapy right away. And it's funny because we were talking about earlier trauma and, blocking things out. I remember leaving the therapy office with my dad, and about for 2 years, I don't have any memories. I don't remember what I talked about. I don't remember seeing a therapist. I know that I went, and I know my parents did what they could. And then I had a lot of anger for a long time because I thought my parents didn't do anything. I thought, why did nothing ever happen to this person? And my mom, she was abused when she was younger. And I had this guided resentment because I thought, how could that have happened? I just, you don't know what you don't know. I developed a severe alcohol addiction, and I had you're a therapist. I had a psychiatrist, and this was in the early 2000s. I don't know across the pond where you're at what the laws were, but here they were very lenient of prescribing prescriptions.
It's easy to get medication in the UK. It's so easy to get antidepressants in the UK. Go to your GP, answer a couple of questions, you're going out with antidepressants.
Yeah. So same here. I think this was like to another extent then, because I think psychiatrists and doctors were getting kickbacks, and they've since made laws against doing that. My dad had found me another psychiatrist. I think I was around 15, and she put me on, it was a low dosage of Zoloft when I started. And within a short time, I was on the highest dosage of Zoloft, Wellbutrin, Adderall. And I looked up on the computer, like, what are signs? Because I wanted to take it. I'm like you said, I looked up some symptoms and I told her I was already addicted to other things. So Adderall, Concerta, and Ambien, because I couldn't sleep at night. Like, why do you think I couldn't sleep? And yeah,
And
really, I was 15. Yeah, that should be just fucking criminal. And I remember one time I was talking to her about all the things that made me sad, and she had this maroon chair, and she was like, her eyes were closing. She was falling asleep as I was talking to her. And wasn't listening, not helping with the trauma, and really heavily medicating me. And I was stealing Vicodin, I was smoking weed, I was drinking, and I was just on this cocktail of prescriptions and alcohol, and I was driving, and I look back and it's like, how did I do that? And that's what trauma does to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I
uh,
Oh, go
as a,
ahead.
as a therapist, my rule of thumb is people take drugs to escape, to forget. People drink alcohol to ease the pain. When you've been through trauma, people often end up doing the both.
Yeah, and you mix that and it's dead. It can be deadly.
When did you know that you were having a real problem? Was it literally just being 15 years of age, or did you think, I'll be all right, I'll be all right? What happened?
I didn't know. Even when I went into recovery, I didn't know. I will say the one thing that there's probably many things that have saved my life, but I remember when I was around 16 and I was like listening to my sad emo music in my room, and my brother said, "Why are you always depressed?" And I said to him, "You don't know what it's like, what had happened to me, and mom and dad never did anything." And he said, "What are you talking about?" He said that my parents had cops over all the time. They had lawyers over, and every cop and every lawyer that my parents talked to said, "Don't take this any further. It will re-traumatize her." And so nothing was ever done. And they've changed the law. Speaking of laws, there was a law put in, and I think it was actually enacted in 2012, which is crazy that it took that long because this was in the 90s. And at the time, I would have had to go in a courtroom with the perpetrator, and they said that will just re-traumatize her more. And it's almost like all of the healing I've done and the research, it's almost like there are systems in place to keep perpetrators out and not in prison. And in the research I've done, only 7% of perpetrators will ever see a day in prison. 93% of people who are sexually assaulting, raping perpetrators that are out there will never see a day in prison. And it's such a flawed system. So my parents did what they,
Thought was right.
yeah. Meanwhile, when I can't remember the age, but my parents had told me that he had died. When I reconnected with this woman who was also a victim, that's how I found out that his girlfriend was part of it. She was helping him get kids. And if you think about it, perpetrators, they go after children of alcoholic parents because they're not paying attention.
Vulnerable. Yeah.
They're more vulnerable. And it's not that they mean to, but if you take all of that generational trauma and you're drinking to cope, it's just,
You're not thinking about everything. You're not paying attention. You're switching off.
yeah. And it's just crazy how, common it is and how like textbook it is. And so I know today that my parents were victims. I love them so much. And my brother, when he had told me about that, he said that my dad loaded a gun and he was going to go and kill him. And my mom had to have a pastor come over. And, I asked my dad about this recently. I'm writing a memoir, and I have a writing column, and my platform has really grown of speaking at universities and writing a lot. And, I don't know if it will go anywhere, but even if it's just for myself, it's been a really cathartic experience. And so in this process, I've been asking people for permission or telling them that I'm going to write this. And I brought it up to my dad, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I was on a trip when I was in New Mexico a couple of years ago. I went there for his 80th birthday. And then when he was driving me to the airport, you have kids. My dad always chooses like the last like 5 minutes together to tell me something. So we're going to the airport, and he just said to me, I would have lost everything. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, I would have lost my pension. I would have lost my military benefit. I would have lost everything, and I would have gone to prison, and you would have had nothing. And so in the end, my parents like protected me and did fucking everything, which I am so grateful for, because I cannot tell you, Lee, how many people I talk to that nothing is done, it's not believed, and it's pushed under the rug.
Yeah, I've got a lot of books on childhood abuse, and it's mentally draining to read it. Unfortunately, the information as a therapist is so valuable, but it's exhausting. I'm not joking. I one book, 160 pages, took me weeks to read it. Read 5 pages at a time. I was going to sleep because I had to get past it there. And the statistics of parents, especially mothers, listen, what a child says is unbelievably high. It's ridiculously high, and it's frightening there. And one of the reasons is because of they don't want to bear the consequences, the shame that allowed this to happen. They could lose this. They can't afford it. It's easy to say you're lying. You're looking for attention. It's so frustrating when you read that, because kids are not gonna even make that up because it's not on their radar unless there's a good reason for it. It's so frustrating. I get your frustration there as well.
Yeah, it's really complex, and you just added another layer of some of the things I didn't think about. Because I talk about I mean, I have this conversation like, abuse and murder. They talk about it like I'm talking about like the sky is blue, and these are heavy things, but I think that the more we destigmatize trauma, and I'm grateful even having a conversation with a man about this. The last person who had me on his podcast was also a man. It's amazing that I just I feel like this is really important for men as well, because men have to protect their emotions, and so I'm grateful that to be having this conversation with you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the reasons I did the podcast is because people, my own clients, were telling me they want somebody, they listen to somebody who's got a story they can relate to, but at the same time feel inspired to. If there's and as the podcast grows, the more people listen to it, the more they're going to be able to relate to a story, the more it's going to help them there as well. Who knows? It could save somebody's life. Who knows? Why not? So, and for me, it's important to hear as many people's stories as well. That helps as well. It makes
Yeah.
it relatable to other people that might, because a lot of people, even though they know it's not just them, they think it's just them. And then until they
Yeah.
hear somebody else tell a story that they can understand and think, yeah, that sounds like mine. So that's the power of it. And that's one of the reasons why I started it there. And it's great that you go around speaking to so many like podcasts, schools, doing the work that you do is brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, what I was just remembered my thought, what I was going to say about that the sky is blue, talking about this so much and being so transparent. Those are a lot of the conversations that I've had with people, students at school, strangers, even friends. There are a couple of friends that I've had for over a decade. And as much as I talk about this, it took them about 10 years to tell me. Oftentimes I find that it's the uncles for women that I know. And the same thing we were just talking about, where it's not believed and they're told they're lying, they didn't remember it correctly. And I'm not a psychic. I don't know what's going to happen, if my book's going to go anywhere or not, but I see the impact that I have when I go speak at schools. I have thousands of letters now, and I speak at business schools primarily. And in the letters, students are not talking to me about their business or their business ideas. Sometimes, rarely, it's both men and women. They talk to me about trauma they've gone through, addiction. I talk about my heavy addiction to Adderall. It's really popular in colleges. I've had people talk to me about, which I'll get into, suicide thoughts and attempts and being in a psych ward, and a lot of it just abuse that has happened to them. One woman, I will never forget this. Yeah, I'm in a lot of writing classes, and in one of the classes, the teacher said, think about one person, just one person who you're writing this book for. And it's just, when I think about her, it makes me sad. I spoke at a class at USC, and she asked to meet with me. And it's funny, I can talk about my stuff and I'm like, oh, whatever. I've talked
It
about it so much.
happens.
Talking about other people, it's hard. And so I speak at all of these classes, and this one particular woman, she asked if she could meet with me to get coffee. And she said, I'll come to you. And we sat and we had coffee and we were talking about things. And I thought maybe it was about her business idea she wanted to talk to about. And she had told me she was at a party and she was drugged, taken somewhere about 100 miles away, and she had been raped. And I was the first person she told it to. And she had never told anyone. And, thank God that I'm going to these schools. And, when I speak, I try to weave in some happiness and humor, and I don't want it
Yeah.
to be so heavy. But I
Yeah.
think something relatable about myself, that I'm talking about things that have happened, and it's given people the opportunity to share their truth. And I'm not a therapist like you, but I gave her resources. I told her what I did. And I really hope that she's continued to get help and healing, because, saying it out loud is the first step.
Yeah, it is. When I've had clients come to me, a lot of guys, like I said, not through any specific reason, that I've, well, obviously there are reasons. My clients come to me and it could be for a variety of reasons there. The high percentage is they've been abused as a child. The amount of guys that I've had, they sat down, I'm like, so what are you here for? And they just burst into tears all the time. I'm just saying, it doesn't bother me if somebody cries, because for me as a therapist, I'm like, great, we're making progress. And it's the first time they've spoken about her. And you can see the weight coming off them talking about her. And there's somebody that's not judging them. Somebody's listening to them. Somebody can understand them. So when you spoke to that girl, it would have made all of the difference to her. And there's every likelihood, I'd be surprised if it wasn't anything other than that, that she would have felt confident to go on to speak to somebody else, i.e. a therapist. So that would, what you would have done would have made all of the difference.
So, and I hope, I hope so. And I'd like to believe that. And even with the friends that I have, because I have close friendships with people, and I've seen as they've started to talk about it, I've seen it's interesting because I'm not a therapist, but I do know from all the therapy that I've been in, both with bad therapists and good therapists, and the books that I've read, and I can get into my addiction in a minute, but it's everything that I did as an abused victim textbook. I had addiction. I was a cutter. I was bulimic. Anything that involved self-harm and self-hatred, I had. And that's the fucking crazy thing. It's when we are abused. I had one therapist who really changed my perspective. I was in my 20s and I'd moved to New York, and I was seeing her, and I was just, up until my marriage now, every relationship that I had prior was abusive in some way or some form or another. Even just dating then, or these toxic situations that I was getting into. And I just made a comment about something like, I don't deserve better. And she stopped me and she said, actually, you did deserve more. You deserve for what happened to you not to have happened to you. And then I kept talking. And then she stopped me again and she said, did you hear what I just said? And I think that that's what abuse does. It fucks with our heads so much that we think we are nothing and that we don't deserve better. And it happened to us because we're undeserving.
What often happens, and I was reading this in one of my books. I can't remember if it's a course that I did or one of the books. It was one of the books that I was reading about it. And where the victim, they're so confused, especially as children, they'll often think that it's their fault. And then what they do is they blame themselves for it, and they got the shame and the guilt. But what's even worse is that they will carry on with the perpetrator's abuse in their own mind. And I pointed that out to one of my clients. That's what she was doing. And the second she realized that she was carrying on the abuse from her perpetrator, she's like, right, I'm changing my mindset. That's it. I'm never going to do that again. I'm not letting them carry it on. But unfortunately, until you have that therapy, until you realize that, you just go around repeating what's gone on for you, which is awful.
Yeah. And the crazy thing too, even in the time that I was sober and like still attracting kind of these, not kind of codependent relationships of gaslighting and love bombing, and they bring you in, and then there's just this toxicity of narcissism and abuse. I experienced that so much and I couldn't see it. And something that I really came to understand after all of this work that I've done is that, and it's not that complex, but it took me a long time to just understand this and accept that I was attracting the relationships that I was attracting because it was familiar in some form or another. And to someone else who maybe had not experienced several types of abuse, they would say, like, when that started, like, I am out. This is crazy. When it's familiar, the
Normalized.
Yeah, chaos. We both said chaos. You prefer to live in that, because when it's so calm, that's chaos in itself.
Yeah, I get it with clients where, and just people I know in general, where they're in abusive relationships, and they repeat the cycle because their brain will say, well, look, they might be abusive, they might make you miserable, but you're still alive. So don't try anything else because this works, even though you might hate it. So they just repeat the cycle. And often it takes a long time for them to meet somebody that's going to be good to them because it's out of their comfort zone. And they often struggle with that type of relationship. It is frustrating when you see that happening. You see the cycle being repeated and they're just a victim over and over again. They don't know how to break out of that.
Yeah. And the interesting thing too, I'll tell you more about my story, but yeah, I'm remarried now and just to the most loving, amazing, kind person. And 5 year, yesterday was our 4 year wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And we've been together for 5 years, and not once has that man ever raised his voice at me. He is so kind and loving. And even with how amazing he is, from the trauma that I've had, and not just that abuse, again, my parents were very, very loving, but my dad, from being a war vet, there was a lot of anger and rage and things that he's been able to get help and work through, and just the neglect aspect that I've talked about. And still, I just go back to, because I don't want to any way villainize my parents. They're amazing, amazing people. Even with that, when you don't heal your trauma, it gets brought into a house. And so what I have gone through and having complex PTSD, even with how amazing my partner is, sometimes if he just moves his hand a certain way, I flinch. And never once has he done anything but loved me. And it has nothing to do with him, but this is like unraveling that stuff that just stays with us. And, maybe I'll be working on this for the rest of my life. I don't know, but it's a lot better.
Yeah, no, that's good. And with that sort of trauma, maybe, who knows? And then it's where it just becomes a journey which you're focusing on there as well.
Yeah.
When did you first feel that you were starting to deal with it? How old were you then? Because at 15, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of alcohol there as well. Psychiatrist, therapist there. How was that affecting you? Were you getting anything from it, or were you just feeling overwhelmed?
I felt really numb. Remember, I'm such an animal advocate. I'm vegan. I love animals. I was at the restaurant yesterday. I was like kind of out like doors, and there was a coyote that walked by, and my husband made a joke like that I would like rescue a coyote if I could. Like I would. Like I just want to rescue everything. I was maybe 17, and we had this Dalmatian lady, and I loved her. And I was so heavily medicated. I remember we had to put her down, and my dad was sobbing. We were at the vet, and he was crying like I had never seen a man cry. And I remember just staring at him, and I had no emotion. I think I knew this must, it was weird. It was like I was trying to feel something that I couldn't feel because of all of that medication. And I saw a movie, Garden State. Have you ever seen that movie? What's his name? Zach Bratt. What's his name? Really, with
No,
Natalie Portman.
I've
Like in
not
the,
seen that. No.
I recommend it.
Okay.
In the movie, his dad's a psychiatrist who like medicates him, and he has a scene where he's like, I'm not taking any of that anymore. I'm like so numb to everything. And I had stopped seeing that therapist who prescribed all that to me. And I made the mistake of just like cold turkey. I stopped taking all of it at once. And that was one of the first times that I was that suicidal.
Yeah.
It was really hard, and I didn't know. I mean, when you're doing that at like 17, 18 years old, however old I was, I remember I felt like I was sinking in a dark, dark hole. And then I stopped drinking for a while. But the crazy thing is, I never saw myself as an addict. I never saw myself as an alcoholic. I stopped that because I thought like I want to feel my feelings again. And then I would stop drinking and I would feel great. And I'm sure you know with addiction and alcoholism that it's a progressive disease. So
Yeah.
when you stop and then you start again, it progressively gets worse. And I moved to California when I was 19, and I had been off alcohol and drugs for a while, but not because I thought like I'm getting sober. I was just, trying to get better. And have actually never shared this on a podcast, but I will because I'm writing about it in my book. And when I moved to California and I was going to fashion school, and this was around 2018, or sorry, 2008. I think I was around 21. I got laid off my job. I was working as a makeup artist, and the only work that I could find was in the adult industry. And I was doing makeup in the adult industry here
Do
in
you need a lot of
Chatsworth.
makeup doing that?
Yeah, well, I know you would think there are a lot of jokes around it, but I guess just, I luckily, I did the makeup and I was able to leave after, but they don't need touch ups. I told you I'd add some humor. I talked to these women, and 100% of the women that I did makeup on that I spoke to had all been abused. And
Yeah.
was I started drinking again around that time. I think almost to
And
cope
that
with
triggered
that.
you.
I was drinking, I think, before that, but I started drinking more. So at that time, and I started doing drugs again and to cope with that. And I was around women that were doing very, very heavy drugs. And it's so
Yeah.
interesting. I saw this situation and I thought like these women are like drug addicts. This is crazy. And that is fucking denial that I was doing drugs and drinking. And because it wasn't a particular type of drug, I didn't see myself as an addict.
You're right. You were
That
back on medication then. You went back onto the medication. You're drinking.
the more of smoking weed and like taking pills and finding pills and things that weren't even prescribed to me. And I mean, that's what addiction does. You find your fix. And yeah, it's just, I look at that now and how did I not see it? But denial is a crazy thing. And I feel like maybe how my purpose is now in these classes at USC and Princeton and Harvard and the schools that I'm talking to and the impact that I'm making, my presence was just as meaningful and important working with those women and talking to them. And the amount of abuse that I saw in that industry from the men and the way that these women were treated and demonized and told that money would not be paid to them if they didn't do certain demeaning scenes. And there were times, and I've actually been writing through this, that I remember one woman, I was like whispering because I could see just how uncomfortable she was. And it was her first shoot. And a lot of these women, they're 18, 19 years old. They're coming from other states. They're leaving abusive environments. I remember this time I was trying to whisper to this woman, like, you can leave. And she stayed. And it was hypocritical of me because just as much as she felt stuck there, it's like the economy crashed. I couldn't find work anywhere else. It paid well. So I was stuck there just as much as these women were feeling like they were stuck there. And it was like I was on another side of it, but I was still immersed in that industry and I was still seeing, this is a short podcast, so I won't go into all of that. And
All right. We've got plenty of time.
yeah,
As
it's
long as you
just
need. As long as you
yeah,
got. Don't worry.
a fascinating industry. And that industry really propelled my addiction. And it's actually how I ended up getting sober when I had left working on a certain event with some of the women in that industry. And I had taken some drugs, not knowing what it was. And I got in my car and I was on the 10 freeway here and just really crazy things that I was doing. And I had to pull off the side of the road because I was so high. And I think what I had taken was laced with something. And I fell asleep in my car for 11 hours on the side of the road. And I do not know how a cop didn't come. I don't know. I was just lucky. And it's so funny too, because when I think back to that, I remember thinking like, oh, I'm dying. I see the light. And it was just the like light above my car, but I was so like out of it. And this is the definition of shame. I remember thinking, what am I going to do? Call an ambulance and tell them I was working on this like adult entertainment event and I took something and I don't know what it was and I got in my car and drove. And in that moment I was just willing to like I was okay with like dying and not asking for help. And that is like the definition of shame. And luckily about I drank a couple times after that, and it was a month later that I got sober. I don't know if did you have the show Chelsea Handler, the Chelsea Lately show?
Yeah, that Chelsea lately, that was on, I think it's on like the comedy channel.
Yeah, she had, do you remember Chewy? He was on the show with her. This was like in
I
the
remember
ear-
the adverts. I never really watched it. It's very American, It's one that it was on, but it's only probably a select few that probably would have watched it.
it was, yeah, very, very American show. I became friends with this person. Chewy was on the show, and my other friend and I, we were really close with him. And he was the only person that I knew who was sober. And he's since unfortunately passed away. But he was open about his sobriety. So I'm not outing his anonymity. He was very open about being sober and in recovery. And when I like hit a bottom, it wasn't that night. You would think it was. The when I hit my bottom, it was just I woke up one morning and I just thought like I can't do this anymore. And I called him and he found me a meeting that was in Santa Monica, an AA meeting. And I remember him, AA in the program, you're not supposed to like bribe anyone, but he said, if you stay sober 3 months, I'm going to give you this bag. He had this really nice bag. And that was not like program talk. That was just like him as a friend. And our friend grew and was more dynamic after that because then I could talk to him about recovery. And I had like one small relapse after that. And other than that, it's been almost 15 years that I've been sober now.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
an achievement. How do you feel 15 years sober?
I feel amazing. I feel like, they say this in the program, you have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And I do today. I really do. I've gone through some of the most horrific things in sobriety and I've gotten through them and it's been part of my, journey and I didn't drink over them and I'm really grateful. I can't imagine. I spent about 8 years doing drugs and drinking. And so now this is like, I've gone much longer of being
Yeah.
sober and clean than of doing that. And I can't imagine. I would never, ever want that life again, ever.
Do you ever feel yourself struggling on a tough day, wanting to take you back there, or do you reckon you're at a point where nothing will ever send you back there, no matter how stressful things get?
I know. I think what I've gone through, which I don't know how much time we have left, but
We got plenty. Don't worry, as
okay.
long as you need. We're all right.
Okay. If I know that I could get through what I went through a few years ago, I don't think I'll ever have a reason to drink. So
Yeah.
I'm sure from you researching my story and finding me in 2018, I'd been married for about a year and a half and, I had just launched my company, Madam Lemy, and must have been, I think, 2 months after I launched it. My then husband was on a job in another state and he called me 3,000 miles away on a phone call and told me he wanted a divorce. And, 'cause I always joke the grass was blonder on the other side.
That's a good one.
I didn't know it in that moment. I didn't know the reasons. I mean, I'm so thankful that I'm not in that marriage today.
Yeah.
So it was toxic and unhealthy and not for me. But in the moment, I didn't know that. I just felt abandoned and alone. And I moved out of our house and thinking he's going to come back and he's going to come after me. And it's like that in itself is a toxic thought. And that didn't happen. And what did happen was I lived in this small 300 square foot dark apartment that was facing a concrete wall. And they say that your outer existence is a reflection of your mind. It's like, no wonder I chose that apartment. And I brought all the stuff that I had and my boxes for my company and my dog that I had rescued, Violet. I found her, she had been hit by a car. Found her in the bushes. She had a broken hip and tailbone, and we took her and she had a surgery. I kept that dog, Violet, and he kept our other dog. I mean, she really saved me in so many ways because I had to get out of my house to walk her. But there was a particular day that I was in my apartment with all these boxes and I was like pacing back and forth for like 3 hours. And I think like I was having a mental breakdown and was in my car that night on the 210 freeway and I was driving erratically and I took my seatbelt off. And I remember I was literally praying out loud. I said, God, please just let me get hit. Please just let me get hit. And I kept repeating that. And I was looking for a semi truck that I was going to swerve in front of. And then this like thought of my dog crossed my mind and I thought she would be alone. And I slammed on my brakes and I got off the freeway and I was already in an outpatient program for my depression where I was going multiple times a day and you working in therapy and recovery, in that kind of setting, they ask you when you go into your like check-in, how are you feeling? How's your anxiety? And it's like a 0 to 10 and mine was like 10 for every answer. And they had called me in, one of the doctors, and they basically gave me the choice to check myself in to the inpatient or they were going to 5150 me. I don't know if it's called the same thing. in the UK.
What does that mean? Does that mean keep you in the facility?
So yeah, the 5150 is where you're forcibly put into a psych ward and they lock you to a bed for 72 hours and you lose your rights. And I was like, I'll check
Right.
myself in. Yeah, I don't want to do that. And I mean, that experience, that could be a whole book, being in that like inpatient psychiatric ward, but that, and same.
Just a quick question. I've got millions. What's going through your mind when you're going, I'm going to have to check myself into a facility?
When I got in there and when the doors shut and they buzz, and I had a panic attack of when you're in that kind of situation, you don't know, like, okay, in a few days you're going to get out and you're going to be fine. But like I felt imprisoned and I felt stuck and I felt like I was never going to get out. And I was like, started like hitting the door and then I was just like exhausted and depleted. And then I was trying to, I remember thinking to myself, I talk a lot if you haven't noticed. And I have, I feel like it's like the gift of gab. Like I always feel like I can like talk my way out of any situation, like all of these crazy situations I've gotten into, like I've always been able to just have a conversation and get out of it. And so I just went to the front and I said, excuse me, there's been a mistake. Can I talk to your manager? And I had to wait in this room and this woman came in and I explained to her, like, I don't belong here. I don't need to be here. It was just a mistake. Like I'm feeling fine, all the lies that I told. And that's, even being sober, it's like an addict is an addict is an addict. Like I lie and I could see it wasn't working. And the woman just said, it's a couple days and you're going to be able to check yourself out. And she was calm. I have so much respect for people who work in that kind of atmosphere because when it was clear that I was staying there and I wasn't leaving and I was looking around and my thought was like, these people are like fucking crazy. I don't belong here. And it was the same thing about my addiction and working in that industry and thinking these people are addicts. I'm not. I was, and crazy. That's the word that I had in the moment. People were not crazy and I was not crazy. I was having mental illness issues that I needed severe help with. And if I didn't get that, I would have killed myself. So I'm grateful. Yeah, I'm grateful
What,
now, but
what year was that?
that was in 2018.
Was,
Yeah.
was that after you got the phone call from your husband at the time?
Yeah, that's what led me to that.
Triggered you?
Yeah, that's being in that apartment that I moved into. And I can look back very clearly now and being so happy that I'm not in that relationship and that situation that caused the end of that. And I will say I can see my part in that as well. That when you have a codependent relationship, that is two people being unhealthy. And I can see very clearly the triggers that I had, the dynamics that were in that relationship. I no longer behave that way. I no longer attract any kind of relationships like that. And I've done a lot of work to heal, to not be in a relationship that was that unhealthy and toxic. And I can see now, looking back, that suicide attempt and that place that I was in, that was not about him. That was decades of trauma. That was decades of abandonment. And that was decades of abuse that resurfaced. And the work that I had thought I had done around that, I didn't. And in many ways, I have that person to thank that as horrible as that relationship was. I look at my life, at least, I think everyone can, but I can only speak for myself. If we look back at our life, we can see a series of events that led us into this very moment, even you sitting here and wanting to have your podcast.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can link a series of events that led you here.
Yeah. I think with my podcast, I could link it back. I think all in all, you could probably link it back to starting in my childhood before podcasting even existed. So yeah, because I wouldn't be here doing this podcast or as a therapist if I hadn't been through what I'd been through. No chance. So yeah, you're definitely right. Definitely.
The things that we go through, and typically I would assume that most people who work in mental health or therapy, you've gone through some shit that
I've never met one that hasn't.
Yeah. You've gone through some things, you've healed a lot, and you want to help people. And that's admirable. And you can look back at.
Yeah. The short version that I give is that I decided to become a therapist. I quit sales And I decided to do something that generally made a difference to people's lives. I actually thought that because I was working in a sales job where you can make really good money, read a bit of paper, go through the motions. That was it. I didn't want to do that. So I decided to do something that's going to fulfill me, make a positive difference to people's lives. When I decided to become a therapist that somebody recommended I do it at, I thought that I will be there for other people when nobody was there for me. And I make sure I do that with all my clients. You know, if clients struggling, they might send me a message or an email. And if I can reply to them and do my best, I will still do that. But every session I get of a client, I give 100%. And I want to be that person that's there for them. And a lot of them have said, yeah, you're the one person. So that does give me a lot of fulfillment that I've actually made a good choice. Because obviously a
Yeah.
lot of the choices would have been bad ones due to everything that, I would have been through.
Yeah. And what you're doing, I'm sure you've saved countless lives and have helped people. I know from that time of being in that facility, I had one therapist, Erin, she was in my outpatient program. She came into like the inpatient where I was, and she talked to me, and I talked in circles. I talked in circles and I said the same thing. And she would
Yeah.
sit and talk to me for an hour, and she would just listen and give me advice. And that takes a special type of person to have that kind of patience. And I found her, I don't know if she got it because you have to follow each other. I don't even know if she knew that it was me, having a different last name now and how I look now. I did not look like this when I was in a psych ward and I was going there. I wore a hoodie. I had my head down. My sponsor at the time, she said, I remember you would come to meetings, and she said it was the middle of summer and you had this dark hoodie on and sweatpants and you were wearing the same thing. It was like swollen under my eyes. Like you could not recognize, you could not look at that person. I was a shell of a fucking person. And anyway, I sent her a message. I don't know if she saw it or not, but I hope someday I can find her and thank her. I'll change the name, but I want to write about her in my book because people like that saved me. If I wasn't in that facility, if I didn't, I had a mustard seed of hope, and I checked myself into the outpatient because I was so sad. And I just wanted to feel some kind of relief. And I was going to meetings and I was doing anything. And I remember one day I was driving to my like outpatient session, and it was so blue. It was California. It was so sunny. And I don't know if this will make sense. It was blue outside and it was bright and it was sunny, and all I could see was gray. I felt gray. I saw gray. I wanted to die because it just felt like life was so heavy. And
Yeah.
I will say that being in that inpatient and then continuing to go to my own therapy. I was in a lot of therapy and like really starting to work through it. I was getting better day by day. I started listening to a lot of podcasts. I was listening to like old clips of Oprah and the Abraham Hicks I found on YouTube, and I made this vision board. And it's funny, I put a lot of things for my life that I wanted, of traveling, publications I wanted my company to be in. I put like Forbes everywhere, put this picture of this like Italian looking man and like a picture of like two brunettes together. Like I just made this like visualization board. And not long after that, Urban Outfitters contacted me
Yeah.
to, yeah, to carry my product. And that was in April 11th, 2019. So it was about, less than a year after that experience that I went through. And I thought, my life, it's getting better. And I had my dog, and I was still really sad and depressed, but not nearly as bad as things were. And then it was about 2 weeks after that, I was walking my dog, and the apartment that I moved into, there was a crosswalk. The parking was across the street. And that was like something that I hated. I was like, how did I go from this like nice life to living in this like small shitty apartment with like parking across the street? And they were like, it was just a crazy intersection. And I got to my car with my dog and I was going to walk her. My therapist at the time, she was having me do EMDR with her. She said, you can also do EMDR walking at, go to the Rose Bowl. It's a place that we have here. Have you been to California? You
No.
haven't. You said New York, right?
New York.
If you come this far, if you come to California, in Pasadena, there's this amazing place. They have football games, and you can walk 3 miles. It's called the Rose Bowl. And so every day she said, just go and get sunlight and walk, and that's going to be part of your therapy. And so I got to my car. I had my dog with me. And then I realized it was around that time, with the iPhone, when you used to put the plug in, and then all of a sudden they came out with like this square plug
Yeah.
that you had to do to like repeat your, and I broke mine,
Fantastic.
and I like too cheap to like buy a brand new one. So I bought this adapter, probably from like China,
Yeah.
to plug it in. And I got to my car and I was like, oh, I forgot the adapter. And I just thought, I don't need to listen to my like videos. I'll just walk. And then my second thought was, I'm just going to run back in and I'm going to get it. And I had my dog, who I'd rescued, who'd been hit by a car. I saw the crosswalk light was on, and my dog was to my right, and she kind of pulled me, and I felt something, and I looked to the right, and a delivery van sped up and hit me and drove through my body. And whenever I share about this at schools, I always say, remember, 9 months before that, I was on a freeway praying out loud to God to get hit by a truck.
It's the law of attraction.
Absolutely, 100%. I think everything, that's another thing we can look back at. I 100% believe that I attracted that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The difference is when I was in that psych ward after doing that, after attempting that and wanting to die, when that happened, my dog, probably from her own PTSD of being hit before, she saved my life again. The doctor said when I was in the hospital, because I didn't know I was going to get hit, that's what saved my life, because I didn't see it. And so when you don't know you're going to get hit, you don't like tense up. And so I don't remember this. I blacked out, but my arms went above my head and I flew, I'm guessing maybe 20 feet forward, and my arms hit the asphalt and not my head. I mean, I had a brain injury from flying that far ahead. When I woke up on the ground, have you ever been in a near fatal accident?
No, thankfully.
Okay. Knock on wood for you that you never are or never will be, or no one you know will be.
There is that.
When you are, it really is like the movies. It's like everything gets quiet around you and you can like feel and hear your heartbeat. It was a really surreal, quiet moment. And for a few seconds, I thought I was paralyzed. That was the first thought that came through my head. And the first thing I said, and I started like mumbling it out loud, I just started saying, I'll walk again. I'll walk again. And I didn't know this in the moment. Like I can look back and I can see like, that is like a badass warrior bitch. Like I was just hit by a fucking van. I'm thinking I'm paralyzed. And the first instinctive thought that I have is to tell myself, I'm going to walk again. And from the movies and TV that I watch and all like ER shows, you hear like in the shows, like wiggle your toes. And so I just like with everything I could, I pushed my toes forward and I could feel it. And I remember thinking, whatever is wrong, whatever is broken, I'm going to be okay because I'm not paralyzed. And then a cop got there and I see my dog running. Someone got my dog. I dragged her. She had to have surgery as well. The first thing that they do when they come, they swarm around you like the movies, and it's just like chaos. And they ask you to wiggle your toes. They put me in a neck brace. And I was not lucky that it happened, but lucky that it happened literally between a police station and a fire department and in Pasadena. Yeah, it was real quick. And there's a beautiful hospital there called Huntington Hospital. And when I was there, I kept calling it Hotel Huntington because it's so nice. I had a brain injury. It's like Hotel Huntington. The difference of the place I was when I wanted to die and then getting hit and surviving that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that you've gone from wanting to get hit desperately, that's all you want is to get hit, then you go into the psych ward, you realize that there's a real problem there. You're trying to lie your way through everything. They're just there kind of almost like with their eyes closed because whatever you're telling them, they've heard a million times. You then start working on yourself there. You have an EMDR therapy, which is brilliant. And around this time, you're starting to kind of feel good about things there. And then the van hits you. It's almost like 9 months later on. And then you've laying there injured. And suddenly you've got this will that you're going to survive. You're going to walk, and no matter what. And suddenly this strength almost seems to like have not appeared because you already had it but just kind of been enhanced by it. So do you think with all of what happened there, suddenly it gave you the extra strength to really push through from where you are, where you were at that time to where you are now to really get that momentum going?
1,000,000%. When I was in the hospital, I look at that time, I was there for almost a month. I had to learn how to walk again. I had multiple broken bones. It's interesting. I had a broken hip and tailbone, which my dog did when I rescued her. So I've since tattooed Violet on my hip. I still have her. She's an old lady now, but she saved my life in so many ways. And that was one thing I was just so grateful for. And I just, I hope I have dogs after her, but I will never ever have a bond or a relationship with a pet like I did with this dog.
No chance, because that was a specific time in your life that you can't ever go back to. And with the
Yeah.
circumstances you found us, and that's never going to happen again. So yeah, you'll have other bonds with dogs and it'd be great, but this is a one-off unique relationship, which is great.
She's a one of a kind. And so I think being able to go back to my dog after the hospital, I think being in the hospital, it's interesting because when I was in the hospital, I'll say this so many times, I love my parents so much, but I know how they are. I know their intensity, and I knew how hard it would be on me if they came to the hospital while I was there. And they kindly respected my wishes. I mean, you have kids. I think if I had a kid, I would say like, fuck your thought on that. Like I would be on a plane, and they respected that, and I really appreciate that. They came after I got out of the hospital. I think the way that my parents are, I think I knew that I would have been attending to their emotions because it would have been so hard for them, and I would have been parenting in a way, and I just knew I was in so much physical pain. I was in so much emotional pain. I was so grateful that I was alive, but I was so depleted. I mean, not long before that, I had just gone through this divorce. I had just gone into that psych ward. Even though I was feeling better, it just felt like life could not hit me harder. Though I was grateful, I was still feeling everything, and the pain, and being on narcotics. It was monitored. I had to, all of these drugs that I was addicted to before, that I had to like reintroduce into my system to not
Mm.
feel the pain, the physical pain of multiple broken bones, of excruciating pain that I would not wish on anyone. And not one time probably consistently for a year, I had to be on some sort of medication. Not one time did I abuse that medication. Not once did I relapse. I worked with doctors, and I knew it was important. That's where Western medicine comes in. I needed that kind of help to not feel that intensity of pain. Being in the hospital on my own, I mean, I had friends and other people and family come and visit, and my parents called every day. That was like a rebirth for me.
Yeah.
From the childhood that I had, of my first memories, I couldn't walk, so I had to learn how to walk again. I mean, just like the basics of being a child, of what we learn, people helping to bring me food, nurses showering me, like bathing me, like child.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was this cathartic experience of a rebirth. And I remember when I was in the hospital, it was very clear. I prayed for this, this happened, I survived. What am I going to do with this now?
Yeah. You got your
And
business, which is going well, despite everything.
yeah,
Despite everything, your business is going well. So what are you thinking then?
my main thought was, I have to do something with this. This was not just for me. This is beyond me. This is for other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I I was already a guest lecturer at USC, the University of Southern California, and I was already talking about some of this stuff. And I just thought, like, when I was able to walk again, the first time I went and spoke again, I was on crutches, but I showed up, and I just started sharing a lot of this, just my truth. And that's really when the letters that I started getting started changing, of what people were telling me. And then I kept showing up, and anyone to this day who asks me to be on a podcast, to speak somewhere, it's interesting. I get asked all the time to speak on panels, and I find myself never really talking about my company or my product or trying to sell it. I just find ways to talk about mental health.
Yeah. I think I mean, and that's great because you get people want to come on a podcast. They got a story to tell, but they just want to talk about their product or whatever it might be there as well. You do the absolute opposite. But for me, it makes me want to come and look up what your product is a bit more. Do you know what? This person that's come on is pretty amazing. Listen to her story. She's got her own business. She's got, okay, well, let's have a look and see that. Because if this half as interesting as what she is, there's going to be something going on. So it might be like almost a sales pitch you didn't realize you were making, but it comes from a really good place there as well. How did you get to start giving lectures then? Because at the moment you're rebuilding your life there as well. You're working on yourself. So how did you get into doing lectures and what made you do lectures?
When I started my company is called Madam Lemy. I don't think I mentioned what it was even called. One of my mentors who was at a business center that I was going to, he was also a professor at USC, and he's like one of the top professors at USC. And I had just started my business, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come and speak to my class?" And the first time I spoke, one of the letters, so part of the requirement, they have to send a letter to thank the speaker. He doesn't assign homework. He has speakers come in. There's a singer, Saweetie, that he was his student before, and she's gone in and spoken to his class. He just interviewed and had Snoop Dogg at USC. He's like the OG Albert Napoli, coolest guy at USC. Everybody loves him. And the first time I spoke at his class, one of the letters was, "You have a great story." And this was before I even really had a story, but I just would encourage you to have some more confidence, because I was like, I don't belong here. I don't know why I'm here. I was just like hunched over. And over time, I've learned how to articulate myself and speak. And I've done it so much that it's like second nature. And you can see I like won't shut up now. But he just kept asking me to go back and to go back. And then after my accident, I was invited to like a women's lunch, business lunch. One of the speakers on the panel, she was the Forbes editor. And remember, I had Forbes all over my like vision board, and I got her card and I wrote about my story of what I'd gone through, and I submitted it to 20 different business publications, including Forbes, including her. And I emailed her and I messaged her on Instagram, what you're not supposed to do. And eventually I think she was like, "This woman is not going to leave me alone." And he's the only person who responded. And I just wanted my piece published to maybe help some people going through some difficult things, to show them that I went through this, I've started a business. And so with USC, I like somehow weave together like mental health and entrepreneurship, which goes together. So I think the kids there relate on these levels of things that I'm talking about. With Forbes, I just thought, oh, that's connected as well. And then she responded and she said, "We don't publish one-off pieces, but would you be interested in being a contributor?" And I went through their vetting process, and I've been writing for Forbes for 5 years as a contributor, and I was hired to write about entrepreneurship and mental health. I've covered a lot of stories on mental health. It's been amazing. And it's just kind of grown. And then last year I had a message on LinkedIn, and at first I thought it was like a spam. Like I was like, this has to be fake. I was asked to be a keynote speaker at Princeton, and it was real. And I went and I spoke to an incoming freshman class going into healthcare. And you've asked me to be on your podcast, and it just
It's not the same as
somehow,
Prince.
it's just as amazing, because whoever hears this is the person who needs to hear it. So wherever it is,
Yeah.
wherever I'm asked, I will show up. And that's what I learned in, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, is that we are of service, and we show up when we're asked to be of service. And so if someone asks me, I say yes. And I just hope that something that I've said, that someone who needed to hear it could listen and hear that. And so, yeah, long story of how USC started. And I'm still a speaker there today and still writing for Forbes. I've talked about my now husband, who looks like the picture I put on my vision board. And
He looks a nice guy. That's a really nice guy.
super nice. And he's Brazilian, but his family's actually from Italy. And so I like put this like Italian looking man on my wall. And I got so lucky. I feel like my life is full, and
Yeah.
having a
When,
business. Go ahead.
when did you get to the point where you decided to look back where you are right here, right now, or wherever, compared to where you would come from your lowest to like say around now? When did you do that? And what did you think?
I look back at it all the time. And
Yeah.
especially because I'm writing a book that, I hope and pray that it goes somewhere massively and not for my own purpose. But if I can replicate what I do when I speak at schools and I can see the emotion that it brings from people and the things that people have shared with me, friends that have shared the things that we've talked about, if I can do that on a larger scale with the book and get it to people in other places, this is why I continue to do this. And so I think about it, and probably specifically, I've been on and off trying to write this book for 6 years, but really in the past, since October, I've like made a decision. I'm writing this. I'm going to look for an agent and I'm going to try to get this published. And, I'm going to do the best I can. And I'm going to keep taking these writing classes. But because I'm in it and writing about it, and it almost feels like I have to get this story out of me, like I have to finish it now. And
Yeah. But also as a therapist, one of the things that I get clients to do, not more than anything, but a lot, is journaling, because you get more out of writing than you do talking. So for yourself, writing your story, it's like extended journaling. I guarantee you're going to get a lot out of that. You're going to find it
yeah,
very therapeutic, without a doubt.
I think everyone should write a memoir, even if it's just for yourself. There have been studies actually through Harvard where they've connected and they've shown that writing can heal trauma. And writing about the things that have happened to me when I first wrote, about that perpetrator and that time in my life. The first time I tried writing it many years ago, I was like hyperventilating and I was not ready to process or talk about that. I'm sure it helped me in a way. When I found out that information from that woman that I connected with, I was already writing and I couldn't write anymore. For a couple of years, I just stopped writing because finding out that perpetrator's girlfriend was part of it, it just shut me down in many ways.
Yeah.
So when I decided to start writing again and I took a stab at that section again, and I was almost able to write it as an observer.
Yeah.
I, prior to writing, I would still have flashbacks all the time. I was still affected by it. And it has lessened so much from being able to write about it. It's amazing. I mean, therapy absolutely helped me, and I'll continue probably for my life to see some form of therapist. But for myself, writing this has been therapeutic. And I'm trying to write and I'm trying to tell this story wherever I am, and not in a way to trigger people. This is a heavy story and I don't want people to be triggered.
Inspiring. And it's not just because you turned your life around, you've got a great brand growing and it's good there. It's that you're writing a book, you're there going around helping other people out, and it really stands out with the lady in the coffee shop there as well. Who knows how much you would have done by having that conversation for her to go on and overcome what she's been through there. So your story is only ever going to help people. And it's a great story and a really interesting story.
Thank you. And I hope that if my book does go somewhere, I hope, changing names and details to keep people anonymous. But I do hope that people can, if it goes somewhere, I hope people can find themselves and find me, because I've talked to so many people. And as you know, I'm sure even clients and patients you've had, you kind of like lose touch. I think it would be amazing for me to know. Even I just went to my 20-year high school reunion, and it's interesting. You have like a certain perspective of yourself, and then you see people 2 decades later. And one woman that I'm friends with, she came up to me and she said, I always felt myself with you more than anyone. She had moved there like a little bit late into our school year. And she said, you talk about things with you and I could be real. And she and I spent some time together when I was in New Mexico. And she told me some really heavy things that I didn't know about. And my point is, this was 20 years ago, and I remember her as like a lovely friend, and I'm glad I reconnected. And her perspective of me was she was going through this hard time I didn't know about, and I was there and I made her feel safe and heard. My overall life motto is to be kind and to have people be heard, because we just don't know how that can impact someone.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I think it's really important. Holly, absolutely loved you coming on the podcast. So interesting, an amazing story, so inspiring there. I really appreciate you taking the time out. Thank you ever so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem.